Tyler with Akuo Performance, and today we're going to talk about Semax and Selank. But before we get started, just like usual, go ahead, like, subscribe, comment, follow, all of the above, and let's get started. So let's get started. Let's just do a quick background on like what these things are. So Semax and Selank are both going to be peptides. They were not something that we just like dreamed up. Our bodies created the blueprint for us already, which is awesome. You know, we just design it after that. They come from different areas of our body. So Semax coming from the pituitary, or not Semax specifically, but the hormone that it's modeled after. Selank modeled after a peptide coming from the spleen. So coming from different areas of the body, but a nice synergistic effect with how they use them and a nice impact on kind of our like subjective consciousness and well-being and how we perceive things, and both have an impact on matters of the brain or effects on the brain. So when we start looking at them specifically and what they are modeled after, so let's talk about Semax first and in brief detail. So Semax was modeled after an adrenocorticotropic hormone. It's a one that's not really important as far as like what it's the specific call out of it, but it's made in the pituitary, like I mentioned earlier, which is a part of the brain, and it helps regulate stress responses, may reduce inflammation, can have an effect on blood sugar management, manage metabolism. Selank, on the other hand, is made after a spleen, a peptide, like I mentioned earlier, that comes from the spleen, and that one's called trypsin. So trypsin, on the other hand, will help modulate a lot of the immune system and also imparts some of its benefits on the neurotransmitters of the brain. So like, what does that mean? What are these things actually doing in the context that we're talking about it for this video? So when we talk about Semax, or really let's group both of them together. So they're gonna have an impact on cognitive enhancement through the anxiolytic benefit, and also maybe some very mild stimulation. And so Semax for most people is gonna be slightly more stimulating, whereas Selank, on the other hand, is slightly more anxiolytic. So when we say anxiolytic, we're not thinking about like a benzodiazepine where you're just like knocked out and like amnesia type effects. Very, very different, much more subtle and productive in nature. So Semax, often people will note their benefits around like focus and stuff like that. And Selank, again, being slightly more anxiolytic. So how do we kind of create an analogy around that and understand like why is that happening? So Semax, probably a lot of what's going on there is its effect on BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And to simplify an understanding what that is, just think of that as like a fertilizer for the brain. Selank, on the other hand, like I was talking about some of the neurotransmitters it's affecting, let's think of that more like a, what's a good analogy? So think of like if you've got a busy intersection and there's just all this traffic flowing through, if you don't have light system, if you don't have a conductor, it's going to be very hectic. So if you have a conductor or you have a light system to help manage that traffic, you may still have a lot of traffic, but it's going to flow through very effectively and very methodically. So that's probably a lot of what we're seeing as far as the benefits of these two items. That doesn't mean there aren't like tons of other benefits, but from what we know, this is likely where we're seeing a lot of what's going on here. So I wanted to do a quick introduction of them, just let you see what they look like. So when you get them, they'll come in a box that looks primarily like that. For example, we'll pull Selank out. So when you get it, it comes in a little vial that looks like this. Let's see, there we go. And it'll have like a little nose dropper when you take it off. I didn't personally use the nose dropper. I don't like that application, just doesn't work well for me. I'm not saying that you should go about this. By all means, follow the manufacturer's suggestions. Personally, what I did was I bought a nasal sprayer online. I found one on Amazon that was advertised to have a nozzle on it that has an even distribution with the spray. It claims that it's used for medical preparations. So I went ahead and spent a little bit more money than the other sprayers, got one that I knew or felt would be consistent with the amount being sprayed each time so that I could create that consistency there. Semax looks very much the same, or I think I showed you Semax Selank looks very much the same, just a different colored label. Now again, going back to the manufacturer's recommendations, it does not suggest necessarily to mix these things together and to use them in conjunction. So I'm not suggesting that you do this. This was just the personal application on my end. So I mix them both in this spray bottle and use them together. Now, a lot of times, like I said, you'll notice people talk about, if you go online and look through anecdotes, you'll hear people talk about they get like this almost kind of ADD-like medication or therapeutic effect from Semax. Going back to that conversation around BDNF and maybe some of the other benefits that it's imparting. Selank, on the other hand, is going to have more of that anxiolytic effect. So if you have enough stimulation already, but you don't have that organization in the brain or that conductor like we're talking about in the traffic, you might be able to get some of that benefit from Selank. And what are some of the things that are causing that? So I'm gonna list a few things out here on the screen for you. But you're probably getting some neuroprotective benefits there. We talked about some of the cognitive enhancement potential that is probably coming from the anxiolytic effect and some of the BDNF. So the modulation of that fertilizer from the BDNF and the neurotransmitters that are coming from the modulation of the neurotransmitters coming from Selank. You're also getting some neuroprotective benefits in there. And some of the things that are coming from that are impacting inflammation, oxidative stress, neurogenesis, cerebral blood flow. We've talked about, what are these things? How long, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but these things have probably been in use. I think they were developed in like the 80s or 90s. So they've been around for a while. So we've talked about like what they are, where they come from, what they look like. I just showed you that just a moment ago, maybe how to apply them. And for me, I don't think I talked about it, but I used 1 to 2 sprays per nozzle about twice a day. And that was with them combined again. So my experience personally, I had used Semax in the past, and I don't believe it's in conjunction with Selank, and I didn't really notice a whole lot of benefit from it. As far as stimulation, that's not usually a big issue on my part. For the most part, I can stay focused pretty well, but when I get too stimulated, when I have too much going on, obviously that becomes a challenge. So with the inclusion of Selank this time, again, I didn't notice a ton from Semax in the past, probably because that's not a challenge for me, but with regard to the addition of Selank this time, what I noticed was I was going through a period, with some both personal and work matters that left a ton of stress on me. Just a lot of stuff to get done, a lot of time-sensitive deliverables. Like I said, personal matters that were very heavy weighing on me. So you start coupling all those things together and it creates a snowball effect, and then, it starts having impact on things that it really even shouldn't, so that then creates more stress to add to that snowball. So what I found was that no, it was not a silver bullet. It didn't fix everything in my life, but what it did allow me to do was to begin to chip away at that snowball. And so what I found was that when I would sit down to work and my brain is just going and I start a task and I know I've got 50 million things to do and they all seem like they have to be done right now. Well, instead, what I did was I was like, you know what, let me give this combination a shot and let's just see if it helps clear the air for me. And that's exactly what it did. Very subtle, but while still profound enough to have the intended effect. And what happened? Well, going back to that conductor analogy, I was able to, effectively manage that flow of traffic much more methodically, so things became much more efficient. And instead of that snowball building effect, what happened was the reversal of that. Because now I started clearing things off my plate. And that helped me manage my stress load, which then allowed me to do less collateral damage with other things and allowed me to start getting through things so that I could remove some of the stresses that were just compounding and slowing me down even more. Now, funny enough, I got into an exchange with somebody on a chat recently, and we started talking about, or they were talking about how they used a different vendor. I personally use Cosmic Nootropic. You're more than welcome to use code ACUO10, ACUO_10 for 10% off. And he said, I use a different source because it's cheaper. I said, that's perfectly fine. The reason why I personally go the route of Cosmic Nootropic is because there's years. I mean, these guys started operating. I remember the original CEO was on the Longevity forums like over a decade ago, and that was when he kickstarted things with Cosmic. But there's years and years of anecdotes from people going through a vetted source. So if you choose to use another source, make sure you're vetting them. There are, surprisingly enough, counterfeit products within this domain out there on the market that have been found, that people have rooted out. And the best case scenario with that is you get some distilled water and you get no effect and you just lost some cash. Worst case scenario is you get something that causes an issue. And, best case, you just lose a little bit of money, but you don't want to affect your health because you went through an unvetted source. So if you have another source that's been effectively vetted that you find saves you a couple bucks, by all means, get after it. I personally go the route of Cosmic just because I need that extra layer of comfort to know that I'll spend a couple extra bucks to make sure that I am getting my intended effect to drive closer to my goal, while also making sure that I'm not negatively affecting my health in the process. So I've enjoyed today. I've got another video coming up soon regarding thymolene and Taxorest. Fun little experiment I was able to see some benefit from there that I'll bring up here in the near future. I haven't done a whole lot of content in a while on stuff like training and nutrition and other stuff, just because I've seemed to get better reception on some of this information, and I've had a lot of questions on this stuff, either from clients or other sources. So I've been focusing on this stuff. I've also got another fun little experiment that I'll reveal later on an interesting new product that they've got, but I won't spill the beans on that. So again, had a blast today. I look forward to seeing you soon. Please like, subscribe, comment, follow, all of that so that you can stay plugged in for the future content coming up.